there's a whole thriving business in date doctors and in folks that are helping people both with matchmaking, meeting people, how to dress, how to act, because people don't know. When you tell kids now that you had to call the girl's house and talk to their dad, and they're like, who is this calling? And then it's like they call their daughter from the yell upstairs because they only have 2 phones in the house, maybe 3. There's no other line. You got to get off the phone because your dad is like, hey, knock it off. I'm paying by the minute. Those are the days, man. Hey, it's your favorite show, the I Just Want This Done Divorce podcast, featuring me, Rayford Dalton Palmer, best-selling author, and my partner,
Rahul Iyer.
Yeah, we're live, ready to rock and roll with you today with an episode that's loaded with ammunition. We've got a whole bunch of stuff lined up for you today. We're talking about Gen Z and relationships. We're talking about a story about husbands leaving their sick wives, allegedly, and more than women leave men. How to protect kids from being in the public eye, a story in the HuffPost that I was featured in. And also, I was in this husbands leaving their sick wives thing. I get interviewed for that. But then celebrity divorce stories, Steve Gutenberg. We're talking about Sydney Sweeny. Jeff Bezos' wedding is coming up, and we've got a scoop on that. We're going to talk about dating trends like we like to. And a new trend in 2025 we have not heard of, partially because we're married dudes. But it is our job to survey the scene for you to stay on top of this stuff. And we've got a new one for you. And earlier, a couple episodes ago, we talked about the upcoming trends for 25. This one came out of left field, so we thought you should know. Then we're going to talk about dating apps and how Tinder has a new AI gadget we want to talk about. Some no-fault divorce news, or the future of no-fault divorce. And then we do have a question from the audience. So we got a fully packed episode. We know you're going to love it. Let's rock and roll. So without further ado, Rahul, let's talk first about this Wall Street Journal story about Gen Z and relationships. What was this all about?
I didn't know what this word meant until just now. A situationship. We're old, we're dating ourselves, but apparently a situationship is basically a romantic entanglement that exists somewhere between friendship and fidelity.
But didn't we used to call it the friend zone?
I think the friend zone was just pure friendship, but this is sort of friend zone adjacent.
So you're not fully dating, but you're not in the friend zone.
Yeah, so you're like straddling the two concepts. And so it was, I guess, meant to limit fallout and maybe even help couples take baby steps towards commitment.
Didn't we used to say we're just seeing each other? Like I say, is she your girlfriend? Oh, we're just seeing each other.
This might be that, or even a little less than that, I guess, in that gradient. So that's kind of how I see it. It's like we might be seeing each other, no labels yet. We might just be friends. We don't know. It's definitely very confusing. Apparently, it's this article in the Wall Street Journal said that the Gen Zers now are ready to commit because they are, quote unquote, fed up with situationships. Shocker. Yeah, they probably want something more meaningful. You know, this article goes on to say how dating is in this gray area has left many in the dark, especially when things fall apart. As is human nature, people want to know, like you just said, what are we, or what is this label? The situationship, it's like, well, I don't know what that is. They gave an example of this person here in the situationship where they stayed at each other's apartments, ate at restaurants together, and met each other's friends, but there was no relationship milestones. They didn't go on vacation together because that would have removed the spontaneity that was part of it. The downside, I should say, is marked by confusion and rejection that extends long after they're supposedly over. But also, the allure is the part where it's like adrenaline and a sense of reward because you don't know what's going on and it's spontaneous. Everything is a mystery and you're living in the moment. Like they say, YOLO.
But that wears on you after a while, right? Yeah, people like new stuff, but they also like to be comfortable eventually at some point and know where they're headed. To define Gen Z, because I decided to look it up as a public service for our listeners, Gen Z, born between 97 and 2012, making them between 12 and 28 years old. So I posit this idea. Is it possible that Gen Z is just growing up and they're getting serious because they're 28 on the leading edge?
You no longer do stuff that you were doing when you were kids running around, right? And they have social media now. So we always talk about this. Go up to someone in real life at a bookstore, at a bar, or something, and just have a conversation, a cold open, right? Just go in and do it. And that's the adrenaline. And I mean, you get rejected. You probably get rejected more than you don't. They don't have that experience anymore. They just kind of swipe, and it's all sort of like you're ordering a pizza.
2023 report by Survey Center on American Life found that 56% of Gen Z adults had a boyfriend or girlfriend during their teen years, compared with 69% of millennials, 76% of Gen X. This is something I've never seen stats on this. I theorized this a long time ago because my kids, they're not kids anymore. My boys are mid-20s. My parents, everybody dated in the traditional way in the 60s. They just taught me that you go on dates. Not everybody did that in my high school. There were starting to be these group gaggles of kids that would go in, a group of boys and girls would hang out together. But there wasn't as much official dating, boy, girl, in a couple as there had been in previous decades. I was a little bit of an anomaly even then in the 80s. And now I noticed my sons weren't really dating. They were just texting all these girls. And, they were telling me about like hookup culture and stuff like that. And why don't you guys just go out with these girls or ask them to dinner or something? They would tell me, no, nobody does that. They wouldn't even go see their friends. They would play video games with their friends and talk to them online. And they would Snapchat back and forth in streaks and everything. But it was that breakdown in social skills where people don't interact with human beings. They have the wall between them of the digital wall or the digital filters between them, and they don't sit face to face IRL, right? So I think there's a deterioration in social skills that is going to impact marriages. Big time. If 56% of Gen Zers have dated a boyfriend and girlfriend in their teen years, dropping down 20% since Gen X, that's really something. And I'm not sure what that says. It's probably not good for society, net. So there's our philosophy for the moment. But really interesting article. And I'm not surprised Gen Z's looking for more because they grew up in this app-fueled culture, missing human contact and just seeing words on a screen.
And they realize that's not a long-term play.
Yeah, it's not real.
And at some point you want something tangible. Their lack of communication skills that were never cultivated when they should have been cultivated. You don't learn to drive when you're supposed to learn to drive, and then suddenly you have to go somewhere. You rent a car and you're like struggling to make it down the street. So
a later story here talks about this AI feature we'll get into, but that thing wouldn't exist if men and women had the communication skills I would argue they probably used to have. Now they need like training, and this rise of dating coaches. There weren't dating coaches. Your dating coach was your mom and dad when I was a kid. And I'm sure there were no dating coaches in the 50s or 60s. So I think it's just a lack of learning the Jedi skills from your master. There's no Obi-Wan Kenobi going around. Now we've got Mike Banovac. We just talked about him pre-show. There's a whole thriving business in date doctors and in folks that are helping people both with matchmaking, with, game as they call it, meeting people, how to dress, how to act, because people don't know.
Can't imagine how much anxiety a 15 or a 14-year-old these days will get if you had to pick up a common house phone, call the other person,
hey, all right,
ask to speak to them because one of their parents will answer.
Oh, sure.
And then have that conversation. I think they'll be crippled with fear and anxiety.
When you tell kids now that you had to call the girl's house and talk to their dad for a minute, Mr. So-and-so, I'd like to talk to Trish, and they're like, who is this calling? And you're,
And then you could hear them pick up the phone on the other end and listen. So you're like, you can hear a click.
And then it's like they call their daughter from the yell upstairs because they only have 2 phones in the house, maybe 3. There's no other line. And then they want to hurt you. Got to get off the phone because your dad is like, hey, knock it off. I'm paying by the minute. Those are the days, man. But yeah, we had 3 phones on our house, 1 in the basement, 1 in the kitchen, and 1 upstairs in my mom and dad's room. We'll move on from the nostalgia corner. But it is interesting to see how this evolved. And now I want to mention the title of this article is Do Husbands Really Abandon Their Sick Wives? The Viral Story Unpacked. This article by Amy Glover for HuffPost UK. I was interviewed for this. And the funny story about it is that several days ago, my publicist reached out and said, Rafe, here's a story idea. Reporter would like you to comment on this story about husbands abandoning their sick wives far more than women abandon their husbands when they're ill. And she's basically, the question was, have you seen this in your practice? Is this a thing that you've seen, blah, blah, blah. And I really hadn't. So I wrote this answer for the questions the reporter asked. And it was like, number 1, no, I really haven't seen it. If somebody's been ill or seriously ill in a divorce case, it's not the reason for the divorce. It's just another complicating factor. The next thing was I dug into the study that the reporter was looking at. Apparently there was a viral video. Let's see, the reporter talks about this. So Amy says in the report, and link, by the way, link to all the stories is in the description of the show, both I believe in the audio version and on YouTube. So it says, Stephen Bartlett read on his podcast, Diary of a CEO. So this is a pretty well-known pod called Diary of a CEO. Shout out to Stephen Bartlett. We're willing to be on the show or come on our show. If a man becomes terminally ill, this is a quote from Bartlett in his pod, and his wife becomes the caretaker, there's a 2.9% separation rate. If the woman is terminally ill, they leave it at 21% rate, which means men are 624% more likely to separate from a woman if the woman gets sick. And then this thing has kind of bounced around virally on TikTok. This sentiment's been on other people's socials, kind of, let's call it man bashing social, right? And the soundbite comes from a 2009 study, and there was a 2015 study that talked about this. And these studies claim to show that men left their wives at a much higher rate than women leaving their husbands in the context of a serious illness. I'm a trained skeptic. I tell people I'm a born optimist and a trained skeptic because that's what we have to be as lawyers. It's self-preservation, and we have to look out for our clients. So we are trained doubters. So I'm like, wait a second. So I want to look at these studies. So I dug into the studies, and I wrote a long response to her saying, hey, did you know this 2015 study was debunked because they screwed up their algorithm? They messed up the math in how they ran the data through their computer program. Another problem was it was a very small sample size. It was like 500 or 600 people. So I thought that was an issue too. But when they redid the math, they found out it was barely a statistically significant difference. It was dramatic originally. And then when they reran the math, it was like, oops, there's really not a material difference between men and women. And so I was like, well, geez, that's a minor problem. And they found out years later, somebody went through and tested the thesis, because these aren't peer reviewed. Well, I don't know if they're peer reviewed or not, but they're not double blind, like true scientifically sound studies, in my opinion. And I am an amateur scientist at best. But what I said in my response was, well, I really don't have much to say. And these studies aren't really what they appear to be. You really need to talk to a social scientist who can dig into these studies and tell you why they're flawed. But just me reading them, I can tell you, A, I did some digging and this one's been debunked completely. And B, I went back and looked at this 2009 study, which says, found a woman is 6 times more likely to be separated or divorced soon after diagnosis of cancer or MS than if a man in the relationship is the patient. I then answered her and sent this to her thinking, oh, the reporter won't do the story because there's no story here, right? Well, she ended up loving it because it's interesting that this has gone viral and people are believing it, and it's just not true. And nobody digs into the details. My ex-wife, she used to console girls in her freshman year when she taught freshman English, and the girls would come in and complain about a boy, and she'd just say, boys are bad. That's kind of the vibe. It's like, well, men are pigs, Okay, well, along those lines, this study serves up what people sort of want to believe. Well, of course, when women have a terminal illness, the guy dumps them. It fits what people sort of expect to hear. Mike quoted me saying in the story, I'm sure there's a vibe among some people that men tend to be less loyal and more selfish than women, therefore more likely to divorce when their wives get seriously ill. But from the limited research I've seen, I'm not convinced. And so I did the homework, and they found out the algorithm was wrong. And by the way, they only studied 515 people. Well, come on. We don't know who those people are. That's not the US. But here's the important thing, and this is the other problem with the other study. The other study was a larger sample size, the earlier one. It wasn't debunked, but what was important was they did not and could not control for other variables. So there's no way to know what other things were going on. For example, just one big item that came to my mind, and I'm just thinking, how can this be? Well, maybe it might be that women don't leave. The reason that women are loyal is not altruistic. It's practical. Maybe the man has more money. Now, I know that's not PC to say, but statistically, it's still true, although it's changing dramatically. More and more women are graduating with college degrees, and they're taking senior roles in business and all that. And the trend has changed drastically since I got out of school. We all know that. That's public information. So perhaps that trend is changing, but divorcing people are generally older. They're 35 to 45 or whatever. And back when they did these studies was like 05 and 09. Well, that's a previous generation of people, folks. Those are basically Gen Xers getting divorced back then. So what I'm saying is it's more traditional situation where more of the men have the money, I'm guessing. I didn't dig into the variables, but let's think about it. Nobody's controlling for the other variables. So we don't know. To come up with a claim like men dump women more because they get sick is really a terrible thing to say when you can't prove it. And not even with a shadow of a doubt can you prove it. It's an eye-grabbing or eye-catching headline, but there's no way you can control for all the other factors in a marriage. And the fact that maybe people are staying for practical reasons, or that it has nothing to do with the illness. So anyway, I digress. This other story briefly, the reporter was interested in Grimes and Elon showing one of his sons on social media and stuff like in the White House, Oval Office, things like that. The reporter's question was interesting. It was, can Grimes, who is one of Elon's baby mamas, can she do something to prevent this exposure in the media? And I did some homework because I don't know Texas divorce law or paternity law. They weren't married. The interesting thing is there really is no law against this. You can put your children on social media all you want. Interestingly enough, there are some laws in some states popping up that require, if a kid is being used for pay on social, a family that's making money on social, that they have to have provisions for them financially to protect them from basically their child actors. And state governments are starting to recognize this, and that's happening. So it's sort of exploitation of children as actors on social. But there's no law about putting your kid in the press or in the media and all that. So they were asking, well, what can you do? You really have to go through normal channels, through your divorce court or through your paternity court, to show the court that there's harm to the child that's being done by the exposure or that will be done. And the court might consider restrictions. So that was the gist. But I just thought it was interesting for people to understand, isn't just something with famous people. There are reasons where people might say the bad actors out there, potentially kidnapping children or child exploitation or sex trafficking or impersonating children. I just read an article that was freaky where they say it takes 3 seconds of a voice audio to replicate a voice in AI. And there's a rise of scammers who are calling parents, playing the audio of their kid, begging them for help. And it's not their kid. It's just they recorded the audio of their child on social media and put it into an AI and typed up all this scary stuff. They're scaring parents into extorting them out of money and saying, if you don't pay us Bitcoin and stuff in X amount of time, we're going to hurt your child. And the kid is actually fine, but they get panicked and they send money real fast. So there's reasons you don't want the child to be out on social, potentially. Those are the ways to deal with it. Okay, now moving to celebrity divorces, because we love that. And as you know, we want prenup. So we're going to see, did they have a prenup? Because first off, we're going to talk about Steve Gutenberg. Rahul, what's the story with Steve Gutenberg? By the way, kind of a star from really like the 80s, right? I mean, he's not exactly a fresh guy on the scene.
Right, exactly. He's from Police Academy, 3 Men and a Baby. He is 66. Him and his wife, who is a news anchor, Emily Gutenberg, are splitting up after 6 years of marriage, according to this Entertainment Weekly report. Of course, as we always say, the reason for the divorce is irreconcilable differences. And that doesn't mean anything, except for the fact that's probably the only ground for divorce in California, as it is in many, many states across the country. So, $1 million question, or we don't know exactly how much it's worth, but the question is, do they have a prenup? And yes, the couple had a prenuptial agreement in place, which will dictate how, quote unquote, the community property assets and debts of the community, if any, should be divided. Gutenberg agreed to pay his wife spousal support, also known as alimony, but he asked that they both pay attorney's fees and costs. Here's the thing, they announced their engagement on Facebook in December 2016 and tied the knot in a small ceremony in Malibu in 2019. They might be from California, so I'm not sure if Malibu was really a destination wedding. You know how we feel about destination weddings.
Right. Gutenberg, star-crossed in marriage, by the way, married 4 years to a Denise Bixler from 88 to 92. So maybe just not the marrying type.
Well, we'll keep track. We'll see if there's anything juicy and what might come out as far as their settlement terms are concerned. I think this is probably one of the more benign ones. So they'll probably just go their separate ways and pay alimony and so on and so forth.
So the alimony's built into the prenup? Is that what the article says?
Well, the article doesn't say. It says he agrees to pay spousal support, which I suspect he would agree because it was probably built into the prenup. We don't know how much, duration, any of those things, but we'll find out.
Well, and we keep you up to date on that as always. And then we've got a Sydney Sweeny update here. Sydney and Jonathan Davino spotted together amid rumors she called off their wedding. Oh no, say it ain't so, Sydney. So the scoop is there's a rumored split with Jonathan Davino. A lot of speculation about Sydney Sweeney's love life. People published reports at the end of March that her and Jonathan's wedding was officially called off. And this is a quote from an insider. She didn't feel right about it, an insider claimed, suggesting the 27-year-old is not ready to settle down and is, quote, overwhelmed by the idea of their wedding. This is a quote. They only lasted for this long because it was hard for her to break it off. They didn't split because there's no love. They split because she just wants to focus on her career right now. Okay.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's not you, it's me. It's this dude, because you look at this dude, he did very well for himself by dating her. By the way, started dating her in 2018, got engaged 2022. Here we are, 3 years later, no marriage. I have a rule about length of time dating. And the rule is you're allowed to date about a year and be engaged about a year, and that's kind of it. And you get married. Otherwise, it's not happening. Or if it does happen, it's like somebody's reluctantly giving in and you're fooling yourself and you're going to come see us eventually. It doesn't take a lot of time to figure out if somebody's the one. It just doesn't. After you go on some dates with them, you know it's good. You know you got your values, aligned and all that jazz. It doesn't take more than several months or a year to figure it out. And then your engagement, any more than a year and you're not serious. You're just not.
Exactly.
You get that open-ended engagement when they say, oh yeah, we're engaged, but do you have a ring? No. Do you have a wedding date? No, you're not engaged. You're just fooling around. So I know I'm going to get hate mail about this, but this is the way I feel about it.
And you know what? You might get hate mail because they know you're right. So it's
truth hurts, baby. The truth hurts.
Exactly. So about this, the rumbling started after the filming of, what was that movie with Glenn Powell that she just did? There was a movie that just came out. And they were saying that her and Glenn Powell were getting very, very cozy and all these like interviews they did after the movie and stuff. And they said it was all just for publicity to draw attention to the movie. But then last week, I guess, after this whole break off, whatever happened with the fiance, she was spotted at Glenn Powell's sister's like pre-wedding dinner or something with Glenn Powell. It's sort of like causing a lot of drama about, well, hey, maybe that wasn't just for publicity and to bring eyeballs to the movie. So maybe there was more. So who knows?
Well, there was an age gap relationship going there. Let's just say Glenn Powell's a little cooler than this guy. I don't know him personally, no offense, but oh dear. Well, there you have it. Her star has risen significantly since 2018. So there you have it, folks. Always interesting, these relationship dynamics between boys and girls and otherwise. Okay, give me the Tyreek Hill scoop.
Just a real brief little pointer here. It's just very, very fresh. So Tyreek Hill, we talked about this in a previous episode many, many months ago. One of the best NFL wide receivers, plays for the Miami Dolphins, used to play for the Kansas City Chiefs with Patrick Mahomes. He had last year, and we talked about this, filed for divorce from his wife, then claimed that it was all a huge mistake and that his lawyer was not supposed to actually file the divorce. It was just an accident, and it was he said he fired the effing bonehead who had done that. I'm sure he hadn't prepared it and signed it, so whatever. But then this week, I guess earlier, he was served with divorce papers that his wife had filed, and they said that the papers were filed after the incident resulted in the police being called to his condo in Miami. It was probably some sort of a domestic. We don't know anything. We don't know what happened, what didn't happen, but it's all very fresh off the press. So
okay, next we have to talk about the Bezos and Lauren Sanchez wedding. That's got to be good.
Yes. So it's the Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez's lavish wedding plans. There's a 500 million mega yacht where they're going to be getting married off the coast of Italy, and guests can stay at a hotel that charges anywhere from $3,200 to $32,000 per night and more. It's apparently being touted as the quote unquote wedding of the century. Apparently, these two are, quote unquote, sparing no expense to ensure their A-list guests are blown away in Venice, set to take place in June. The Amman Venice and the Gritty Palace are completely booked from June 26th to June 29th. And in preparation for the event, Venice is bracing for the arrival of the quote unquote VIPs, where there'll be water taxis and all these things. We have to see what exactly it comes down to. He had dropped a 20 karat diamond ring for her, which is estimated to be worth a whopping $2.5 million.
Yeah, this is beautiful. So first, let's talk about my rule about wedding rings. The bigger the ring, the weaker the relationship. If the guy has to give a giant ring to the lady, even though this guy's a multi-zillionaire, if the woman really, really loves you, you could give her a literally piece of gravel on a ring and she'll be cool with it. I'm exaggerating just to make the point that, my parents had no money at all, and my dad gave a very minimal ring. And when I got married the first time, I gave a tiny ring to my wife and she was happy. I had zero salary, so that 3 times your salary rule or whatever was, 3 times 0 is 0. And I saved up and bought it. But when I see people give the gigantic ring to somebody, it's like, what are you compensating for? If you're a billionaire, I'm not saying go cheap, but I'm saying something ridiculous. I just think it's like a sign of weakness. That's what I'm saying. I think it's trouble when you are trying to give somebody a gift. You can't buy love. You can rent it. and when you try to buy it, there's a weird power dynamic thing that happens. Something is off there. And I'm not a social scientist and I'm not a psychologist, but 20 carats, I guarantee you there's the world's most epic prenup, because in his divorce with Mackenzie, he gave half away. And that was ouchy.
Because he got married when he had nothing.
And she deserved half. I'm not giving any trouble to Mackenzie Bezos on that. So, we just want to say in general, the Indians win on this because one of the things they mentioned is, it's his $500 million yacht. And Rahul and I were talking before the show. He's got a yacht worth $500 million. You looked up the wedding and how much did they drop on the wedding?
The Ambani wedding, they speculate they've dropped about $600 million. The pre-wedding and the wedding. It's not like they bought a building before it. They built everything.
They lit the money on fire for the wedding. They spent it. They don't keep the yacht afterwards. It's just gone. That's when you're rolling heavy. When you are big time, you drop $600 million and just walk away.
That's that FU money, right? They say, right?
So Bezos can't even hold a candle to these guys. So
he might on paper be worth a lot more than them, but they're not celebrating like it.
The line you said that I loved was you said they didn't just bring the playlist. They bought the playlist and hired all the people on the playlist and paid them to fly over and sing the music in India at, millions and millions of dollars, which is phenomenal.
It's like, I love this song by Beyonce, this by Justin Bieber, this by this person. So I'm going to, have a live action playlist here.
They're all coming.
And they're all here.
They're all coming.
Have the Kardashians here,
Right.
Why are the Kardashians at an Indian wedding?
It's so amazing. It's so awesome.
Because they can.
Next, I want to talk about a dating trend, which we always like to keep you folks abreast of dating trends. This is the trend of the micromance. Now, we didn't talk about this in our previous show a few episodes ago where we talked about upcoming trends for 2025. Some of these dating apps do research and come up with these trends. They survey a bunch of their users and they had several upcoming trends for 25. Kind of like when the company picks the new color for the year, Pantone picks the color. Well, this one was one Rahul and I hadn't heard of. It's called Micro-mance. And the idea is this is the number one trend listed by this article from Prestige Online. Don't know who they are, but from Sranji Gupta Roy. And the trend was this micromance thing, which was forget grand declarations of love or sweeping gestures out of a rom-com, or maybe this goes against what we were talking about. 2025 is about micromance. Okay, we're like, I'll bite. What's this? According to Bumble, 92% of singles now believe smaller, heartfelt actions speak louder than extravagant displays of affection. From curating a playlist of songs that remind you of someone to sending them a silly meme during a busy workday, these little moments are how modern love thrives. So we used to call it making a mixtape back in the day when we actually had tapes. Now it's, curating a playlist and you just forward the link. Back in the day, it took physical effort. You had to sit there for hours pulling records off your shelf and picking that right song by Modern English or Yaz or New Order. And you play that one tune that you knew would make her love you. And you had to order it carefully. And then you would write the songs on the little label and then put it in the box and give it to your girl at high school at the lockers. That's how it's done. You had to put in a lot of work. Now you just click some songs like, here's your playlist, or now you have AI just curate it. So the article says this shift represents a deeper desire for genuine connection. Singles are saying goodbye to the pressure of performing love and hello to authentic everyday acts that show they care. It's not about spending big. It's about thinking small, opposed to Bezos, who is spending big, but make it meaningful. In a world where attention spans are short and schedules are packed, Micromance makes love accessible and deeply personal. So there you go.
What you guys should do is actually make a real mixtape like Rafe just said. Go to Facebook Marketplace, buy one of those old tape recorders, make the actual mixtape, and then drop it off at the lockers with a tape player.
Or if you're older and you're not dating girls in high school, so don't be a creep. The next one I'll just introduce, the AI game on Tinder. I saw this story and I was like, I got to hear about this. What's the scoop on this?
So Tinder and OpenAI have the game. What it is, basically, it's an AI-fueled meet-cute simulator that's supposed to help you practice your quote-unquote Riz before you actually enter the dating world.
Can you explain Riz for those of us who may be somewhat older and don't know what that is?
Riz is basically like game, or it's short for charisma, where it's sort of like you have cool lines or pickup lines, essentially, for someone. And so what are some good pickup lines? What's good Riz, I guess, right? And so This helps you practice. This game basically emulates a meet cute scenario where a random AI-generated, conventionally attractive person is
What
going
does
to be
that
there.
mean? I saw that term. What is a conventionally attractive person, or a cap?
I would love to see some images of what they think are these conventionally attractive people, but it's weirdly enough, it was launched on April Fool's Day, but the game is real. And the game is built around OpenAI's voice-to-voice model. And unlike that company's Whisper API, according to this article, this model features very little time between you talking to the AI and receiving a response. So it's supposed to be like a natural interaction. Users are encouraged to use their natural charms to entice the AI generated characters into a date. So you're basically trying to get this computer to go on a date with you. And the fact that I called it a computer or this robot tells you how antiquated my vocabulary is. But the app rewards players for curiosity, warmth, listening, and asking questions.
I guess this is a sign of the times, right?
Yes, exactly.
One interesting side note is the reporter talks about this in the article, and it's kind of has an interesting take. In the reporter's Kyle Barr. This is published April Fool's Day, and Kyle's take is interesting. This is a quote: "Quickly reminded me of how dating apps have limited our ability to make connections organic. Instead, left us relying on an algorithm to serve us humans like Instagram Reels." I thought that was an interesting take and kind of well said.
Absolutely. So a funny thing from the article was they say there was nothing natural about talking to this generated character, but they said it might still be less awkward than talking to a real human. So apparently, in an example in the game, Tinder showed several execs huddled around a phone trying to entice Chloe, 24, of Tennessee, into a date, which just sounds completely creepy. You got these old guys trying to talk to this 24-year-old trying to get this computer robot into a date. Chloe came out speaking, according to this article, in the most Kentucky Fried accent I've ever heard from an AI. It was like listening to the Looney Tunes as voiced by Tina Fey's Liz Lemon from 30 Rock.
That's so great.
And then they had, more examples. So it's hilarious. I mean, I genuinely want to try it out because I think it's going to be hilarious. I think it'll be a really fun game. See what our Riz matches up to these kids these days.
We should maybe fool around with it on the show sometime and see what happens, just to see if we can riz it up, as they say.
Exactly. They'll have to explain why I have Tinder on my phone, to my wife. But
it's so funny.
Yeah.
The next is a future of divorce laws. And this is just tying in with, or no fault. This is just tying in with stories we've traced before where there is a trend in just a few states to kind of limit or erode traditional no-fault divorce. And some of these attempts have just been rejected outright. It mentions a summary of some changes. Most of these are from 2024, but they believe with the presidential election and the sort of trend with some Republican victories that there may be a trend toward chipping away at these no-fault divorce laws. And a couple of these are, it's like Louisiana, Oklahoma, Texas. There's some proposed bills out there. We talked about the Indiana bill a while ago. That bill was withdrawn, so that's gone. But we'll follow these things. If any state introduces a bill and it's moving through a legislature, we'll certainly address it in the show. But just to touch base, we're monitoring these and we'll let you know. But nothing dramatic has happened in any of these states since we've last checked on this. And as news occurs, we will, of course, share it with you because these are major legal changes for divorce in the United States. So we'll cover that. Finally, questions from our audience. This question, Rahul, was a good one. And I thought it was well stated. The question was, will a judge's decision, or I should say recommendation at a pretrial conference, change much at the trial? I'll just set the stage or introduce the idea. So for those who don't know, a pretrial conference is a meeting between the attorneys and the court in a private session in advance of a trial, usually significantly in advance. So months before a trial date, the judge will meet with the lawyers in an attempt to settle the case. The judge will review pretrial memos, which are positional statements made by both parties about how they think the case should be decided, listing the facts and the applicable law and what each side thinks the outcome should be. And usually they attach some documents like a financial model showing the balance sheet for the marriage, maybe a model explaining alimony and child support, and documents backing up the claims made in the memo. The judge reads the memos and then meets with the lawyers. Assume it's about 20 minutes or half an hour. The lawyers then hit the highlights on their arguments and the judge makes recommendations for settlement. So those are recommendations. They're not binding. The judge makes the recommendations and then the lawyers go back and tell their clients, and then maybe they settle the case, maybe they don't. This person's saying, okay, the judge has made the recommendations. Judge move off of those at a trial. So what say you, Rahul?
I say possibly, but not likely. And the reason for that is I say possibly is because pretrial recommendations are based on certain assumptions. The assumptions are that whatever each attorney is representing to the judge is 100% true and accurate, and that they can actually show that or have evidence to prove what they're saying. Pretrial doesn't have an evidentiary sort of requirement. You're just talking to the judge about what the facts are. So if you were to misrepresent a fact, which you should not do, and the judge takes that misrepresentation representation, inadvertent as it might be, and makes a recommendation in part based on that, but you can't actually prove that at trial, then if one side does not accept the recommendation and you cannot establish that as the fact at trial, and the judge will say, well, I might be leaning towards this, but you haven't proven that to me yet, so I can't order that for you. So the answer is a pretrial is really supposed to give the judge exactly what the facts will demonstrate at trial, so the judge can make the most accurate recommendations to settle your case. About 92% of cases settle before a trial. And so if you want to know if a judge will move off of them, yes, a judge may, if you can really establish that something the other person said wasn't true, or you have evidence to support further beyond what you've already explained, something new has happened that can really support your position even more. But absent that, very unlikely. The only other situation is, in some cases, a judge who does a pretrial recommendation won't actually conduct the trial. If your case gets shipped off to a different judge, now they're starting off fresh, so you're getting a second bite at the apple. Now that judge might see things differently based on your circumstance, and you might get a separate ruling at trial versus what your first judge said at the pretrial conference. So your mileage may vary.
Thank you. That's absolutely right. We always love the questions. Please keep them coming. That helps us, and we like to answer good questions we get from the audience all the time. That's really it for the show, but we want to talk about where we can be found. Rahul, where can folks find you online on social media?
You can find me on LinkedIn and on Instagram at Chicago Divorce.
You can find me at Rayford Palmer on Instagram, TikTok. I'm also at Rayford Palmer on X or Twitter. You just Google my name and find all my socials very easily. Rayford Palmer, Rayford Dalton Palmer. Our firm is at stglawfirm.com. That's stglawfirm.com. And I'm the author of the best-selling book, I Just Want This Done: How Smart, Successful People Get Divorced Without Losing Their Kids' Money and Minds. Available on Amazon, Kindle, and where all great ebooks are sold. Also, don't forget Audible. Got the audiobook version, which I narrated myself. Still a bestseller after all these years. And working on a revised edition that will come out in maybe a year. And working on my second book, I Just Want to Know, which should come out much sooner, like in a few months. Watch for that. And always check out our social media stuff and our YouTube videos, STG Divorce Law. We've got our channel for the law firm on YouTube. And also there's a channel for the I Just Want This Done Divorce podcast. Thanks as always. We appreciate you listening. I'm Rayford Dalton Palmer. And with me as always is Rahul Iyer. Thanks very much, folks.